This high school graduate planned to sell herself to a mafia boss. The man invited her to dinner, then tossed her a room card before leaving, giving her enough time to think it over. Although she didn't want to degrade herself like that, the high-interest debt her father owed was truly impossible to repay. She had no other choice. A few days earlier, this woman named Mido had been at a welfare center for the poor. After helping her father bring home the government-subsidized rice, she saw that the glass window of her house had been smashed. Inside were several fierce-looking men, and the leader among them was Tae-sang. When Mido's father saw his daughter return, he hurriedly begged Tae-sang to spare him just this once. Tae-sang glanced at Mido, then decided not to make things harder for her father, and left with his men. Mido knew her father was in debt, but she hadn't paid much attention to it. Unexpectedly, the next day she received a call from her mother, saying that her father had left a suicide note and wanted to end his life. Tae-sang's side also received the news, and immediately sent people to bring Mido's father back. When Mido arrived home, she saw a group of intimidating men surrounding her parents. Instinctively thinking her parents were being abused, she fearlessly rushed in to fight them. When Tae-sang arrived, he saw Mido's unyielding attitude and was reminded of himself as a child when he, too, had been beaten by debt collectors. Then he noticed a report card that had fallen out of Mido's school bag. In that moment, he felt a pang of sympathy and stepped forward to block the hand raised against Mido. Realizing that he was the boss, Mido promised she would repay the money before the deadline. Tae-sang agreed immediately, left his business card, and departed with his men. He didn't expect that on the day the debt was due, Mido would come to his office and say something that stunned him. She offered herself to him in exchange for money. Seeing Mido's reddened eyes, Tae-sang felt a pang of pity, but he still agreed. That night, he took Mido to a hotel. After dinner, he gave her one last chance to think it over, but Mido still chose to stay. When Tae-sang returned with some food and saw her waiting, he couldn't help feeling surprised. Fortunately, he had never truly intended for her to repay the debt with her body. He only wanted to scare her a little so she wouldn't say such reckless things about selling herself again. Tae-sang threw the food he bought to Mido and told her to take it home. He then said he would waive her father's interest as long as the principal was repaid. That was already the greatest concession he could make. After seeing Mido's report card earlier, he felt she deserved a bright future and shouldn't ruin her life because of her father's debt. The mob boss's woman, meanwhile, was infatuated with a low-level thug under his command. Despite the boss sitting right beside her, she kept gazing at the thug with eyes full of longing. Unexpectedly, the boss noticed everything. At that moment, a few of the subordinates suggested Tae-sang go on stage to sing. They all shouted his name together. The boss grew increasingly irritated. It was supposed to be his birthday party, yet somehow it had turned into Tae-sang's stage, leaving him feeling like an outsider. Jealousy flared up inside him. He wanted to humiliate Tae-sang in front of everyone. Even though he knew Tae-sang couldn't sing, he still ordered him to go up and perform a song for his birthday. Tae-sang, unaware of the boss's thoughts, instinctively refused. The boss became even more displeased and brought up Tae-sang's mother. His mother was a forbidden topic. Ever since an incident when Tae-sang was 17, his mother had disappeared, and he had been searching for her ever since. Those around him never dared to mention her name in front of him. Now, the boss, whom Tae-sang respected, was mocking his mother at a drinking table. Unable to endure it any longer, Tae-sang stood up and left. The boss, too, could no longer hide his anger and pointed at Tae-sang, cursing him loudly. The birthday party instantly turned into a scene of gang discord. Finally, Tae-sang crushed a glass with his bare hand to put an end to the conflict. Seeing him leave, the other subordinates also refused to stay and followed him out one by one. After the argument with the boss, Tae-sang still didn't forget to tell his subordinate Jae-hee to bring a bank book to Mido. It contained her college tuition money. Jae-hee, however, didn't have a good impression of Mido, since one of the reasons the boss had gotten angry at his birthday party was precisely the debt involving Mido's family. Jae-hee believed Mido was the cause of the rift between Tae-sang and the boss. When Mido asked about the interest, Jae-hee almost lost control and tried to hit her, but managed to hold back in the end. Mido didn't want to use the dirty money. She asked Jae-hee about Tae-sang's whereabouts and went to find him. At that moment, Tae-sang was soaking in a hot spring. Seeing Mido suddenly appear, he became flustered and quickly covered himself, telling her to wait outside. After he got dressed, Mido handed him the bank book, but as expected, Tae-sang refused it. He told her that when people are in difficult situations, they only dare to dream dreams that match their wallets. He didn't want her to be like that, so he wanted to help ease her burden of tuition fees. The reason Tae-sang did this was because he saw his past self in Mido. When he was 17, he had also been an outstanding student. If his family hadn't fallen into debt and abandoned him, he wouldn't have gone down the path he took now. In such circumstances, he didn't want Mido to end up the same way. Previously, after Tae-sang had a conflict with the boss boss had angrily taken Mido to vent his rage. When Taesong found out, he went in alone to rescue her. Unfortunately, even after risking his life, he didn't receive the slightest bit of sympathy from Mido. She didn't look back and just ran away. She didn't call the police or seek help. When Taesong collapsed, his mind flashed back to when he was 17. That day, when he returned home as usual, dinner was already set on the table. However, his mother was nowhere to be found, only a note telling him to run away. Then a group of men burst in, asking where his mother had gone. Soon after, he saw his father take poison to kill himself, and the creditors came to collect their debts. From that day on, his once happy life shattered, and one of the main culprits was his current boss. When Jae-hee arrived, he saw Taesong lying on the floor, covered in blood. Without hesitation, he rushed forward and fought with the boss, but he was no match, and was quickly beaten down. Just as the boss was about to strike the killing blow, Taesong regained consciousness and weakly shouted for him to stop. The boss didn't continue attacking Jae-hee, but instead picked up a knife, intending to finish off Taesong. Jae-hee seized the chance to knock the boss unconscious with a vase, then took Taesong to the hospital. The deputy chief standing nearby had witnessed everything. He didn't step in to help anyone. He silently watched them kill each other. When Taesong woke up, he heard that the boss was dead. Jae-hee planned to turn himself in and asked Taesong to take care of his younger brother, Didol-yi. Believing the boss had truly died by Jae-hee's hand, Taesong wanted to take the blame for him, but Jae-hee had already made up his mind. The people he cared about most in this life were Taesong and his brother Didol-yi. He would rather suffer himself than see the two of them suffer. Time flew by. 7 years later, Taesong had changed his name and identity, becoming a successful businessman. Over the years, he had always kept his promise to Jae-hee, doing everything he could to care for Didol-yi. Fortunately, Didol-yi was ambitious and hardworking. Although Taesong and Jae-hee had always kept the truth from him, he wasn't stupid. He had guessed much of it. Still, he held no resentment toward his brother. Instead, he felt he had to work even harder to be worthy of his brother's sacrifice. The waitress at this luxury hotel looked with admiration at the wealthy young ladies, laughing happily as they ate premium steak. At that moment, her best friend secretly handed her an evening gown and an invitation card from a designer, telling her to put it on and join the party to see if she could catch a rich guy. Even if she couldn't, she could still make connections with those rich girls and wouldn't have to worry about finding a job later. In the end, Mido put on the borrowed evening gown. Walking among the truly high-class young ladies, she was extremely nervous. However, her target that night wasn't the rich heirs, but rather a wealthy young woman who owned an art gallery. A few days earlier, she had failed an audition for a TV host because she forgot her lines. Then, when she applied for a position as a gallery guide, she was rejected for lacking overseas experience. This time, she was determined to seize the opportunity. Summoning all her courage, she approached the young lady to greet her, but the woman immediately recognized her as a restaurant waitress and mocked her, asking how a mere server could show up there. Exposed in front of everyone, Mido felt humiliated and instinctively wanted to run away, but the young lady wouldn't let her go, insisting on embarrassing her further. The event organizer beside the young lady, not wanting to offend the guests, also asked Mido where she had gotten the invitation. Mido's best friend, who was working as a server at the party, felt guilty when she heard the question, and quietly stepped back. The string of questions made Mido feel as if her dignity had been trampled into the ground. Finally, she snapped. The insulted young lady grew angry and splashed red wine on Mido, but Mido didn't hold back either. She grabbed a bottle nearby and threw it back at her. She never expected that this moment of impulsiveness would bring even greater humiliation later. Less than 2 days afterward, that young lady came to the restaurant where Mido worked, bringing her group of friends, and specifically requesting that Mido serve them. Unable to refuse, Mido reluctantly took their order, but after serving the dishes, the young lady accused her of bringing the wrong meal. Taesong, who was attending the birthday party of his close friend Sungju, happened to see Mido about to kneel before the arrogant rich girls. He couldn't bear it any longer, rushed over to pull her up, threw down a stack of money, and led her outside. Taesong was furious. Although he hadn't seen Mido for 7 years, every year he had covered her tuition and living expenses, even double at times, just so she could study without worry. Yet now she was being humiliated like this. Taesong's questioning only made Mido feel even more wrong. What was it like to be pursued by a domineering CEO, tuition fully covered, her father's medical expenses taken care of, and after graduation, a guaranteed job at his company? Now the CEO was even proposing marriage, promising her a life of luxury and comfort. Taesong himself didn't know when he had fallen in love with Mido. Perhaps it was from the very first time they met. The girl had completely captivated him. Mido back then was just like his younger self. Because he had once stood alone in the rain, he now wanted to be the one holding an umbrella for someone else. However, their first meeting had not been pleasant. Over the years, Mido mostly resented Taesang. She resented him for humiliating her and her father. She was a woman with strong pride and didn't want to marry a man she didn't love just for money. So when Taesang sincerely proposed to her, Mi-do flatly rejected him. Although Taesang was a bit disappointed, his confession wasn't entirely fruitless. At the very least, Mi-do's perception of him gradually began to change. After working at Taesang's company, Mi-do came to realize that he wasn't a bad person. After founding his company, he used his earnings to fund education for poor children. Seeing Taesang happily playing with those children, Mi-do couldn't help but smile. Knowing that Mi-do's father was hospitalized and her family's bookstore was left unattended, Taesang came almost every night to help her clean up. This small bookstore, once the place that made them enemies, had now become a private space where their feelings began to grow. Although Mi-do still hadn't completely let go of her resentment toward Taesang, at least she could now smile at him and willingly sit down to have a meal together. Seeing that Mi-do no longer avoided him, Taesang pursued her even more passionately. When Mi-do went on a business trip, he arranged a luxurious room for her. The moment she entered, she saw the room filled with fresh flowers and champagne. The food was already prepared, and even vacation clothes had been delivered. Everything had been carefully arranged for her. It didn't feel like a business trip at all. It was clearly a getaway. In truth, Mi-do was there for work related to the resort project. Taesang's arrangements were simply his way of giving her a chance to see more of the outside world. Through his own methods, he was gradually fulfilling his promise to her while keeping her from feeling pressured. However, Taesang didn't realize that this thoughtful arrangement would bring him a romantic rival. While Mi-do was going around with her travel guidebook, taking notes everywhere, Dae-dol-yi was nearby, taking photos with his camera. The two often passed by each other without noticing. It wasn't until Dae-dol-yi sat down to review the pictures he had taken that he discovered Mi-do had accidentally appeared in one of them. He was instantly captivated, smiling unconsciously as he looked at her image. Just as he was thinking about how to find this girl, Mi-do herself approached him. Her guidebook had happened to fall right near where he was sitting. As Dae-dol-yi casually flipped through some of her notes, he noticed they were all about expensive yet unauthentic restaurants. So he called Mi-do back, introduced her to several genuine restaurants, and even personally took her on a tour. As a result, Mi-do developed a deeper impression of him. After that, the two of them often ran into each other by coincidence, drinking together, playing games, and attending parties. Through their conversations, they discovered they had similar interests and even came from the same hometown, which made them grow even closer. In front of Dae-dol-yi, Mi-do dropped her usual mature facade and returned to being a true college girl. Meanwhile, while Mi-do and Dae-dol-yi were enjoying themselves, the pitiful Taesang kept calling her again and again, but no one answered. He became increasingly disappointed. In truth, it wasn't entirely Mi-do's fault for ignoring him. Earlier that day, she had called Taesang, eager to share what she had experienced, but unexpectedly, it was Sung-ju who picked up the phone. Taesang wasn't there. Sung-ju had always liked him, and after meeting Mi-do at the hotel, she had realized Taesang treated this girl differently, so she deliberately acted intimate with him in front of Mi-do. This time was no exception. She intentionally called Taesang honey, and told Mi-do that he was too busy to take the call. Mi-do immediately felt as though a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. She realized there was another woman by Taesang's side. Whatever feelings Taesang had just begun to stir in her heart vanished at once. However, Mi-do's bad mood didn't last long. Dae-dol-yi soon lifted her spirits. The two partied wildly together through the night. When Mi-do returned to the hotel, Dae-dol-yi was walking toward her holding two stuffed animals. In that moment, she suddenly remembered years ago, when she helped her father collect government aid, there had been a boy carrying rice toward her in exactly the same way. That boy was none other than Dae-dol-yi, standing before her now. It turned out they had met long ago. Realizing this, Mi-do completely let down her guard around him. The two even promised to go out together next time. Though they had known each other for only a day, it felt as if they were longtime friends. With Dae-dol-yi by her side, Mi-do's trip became much more enjoyable. Meanwhile, our domineering CEO Taesang, seeing that Mi-do still wouldn't answer his calls, decided to go look for her in person. Just as Mi-do returned from her date with Dae-dol-yi, she discovered Taesang had also arrived. Even though they weren't together, she still felt a bit guilty, and quickly made an excuse before hurrying back to her room. Later, Mi-do received a bouquet of flowers, sent by Taesang, with a card inviting her to dinner that evening. Remembering the phone call from the other day, she hesitated for a moment. Not long after, Dae-dol-yi called as well, also inviting her to dinner and saying he wanted to introduce her to someone important. That person was Taesang. Dae-dol-yi and Taesang already knew each other. After this coincidental meeting, Dalyi wanted to introduce Mido to Taesang as his girlfriend. Unexpectedly, Taesang was also pursuing Mido. The two men had become love rivals without even realizing it. Feeling conflicted because of Taesang, Mido didn't want to go out and declined Dalyi's invitation. Just as she was about to rest, Taesang arranged for hotel staff to deliver cold medicine to her room, which deeply moved her. Feeling that she still held a place in his heart, she decided to give him a chance and accepted his dinner invitation that night. But just as she arrived at the restaurant dressed beautifully, Mido suddenly saw Sungju appear, tenderly touching Taesang's face. Mido immediately grew furious. When Taesang turned around and saw her, she instinctively ran away, not giving him any chance to explain. Realizing she had misunderstood, Taesang leaned helplessly against the elevator door. What was supposed to be a dramatic dinner instead turned into a private moment between Taesang and Dalyi. Late that night, feeling dejected, Mido went out for some air and accidentally saw Taesang swimming. She noticed a long knife scar on his back and suddenly remembered the night she was kidnapped. Taesang had shielded her so she could escape. Could that scar have been left from that night when he saved her? Thinking of that, she unconsciously stepped closer. Taesang, being a modest man, unused to showing his body in front of a woman, instinctively dove back into the water. Mido asked him about the scar, but Taesang didn't want her to feel burdened, so he didn't tell her the truth. Mido didn't want to press further and turned to leave. Taesang quickly called out to her, asking why she hadn't come to their dinner. The frustration bottled up in Mido's heart finally found release. When she questioned him, Taesang felt relieved. It turned out she had misunderstood him out of jealousy. He smiled and explained that Sungju was just a friend and that there was nothing between them. He told her that from the beginning, the only person he had feelings for was her. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Mido also realized her true feelings for Taesang. After thinking it over for a night, she decided to cancel her date with Dalyi and return home with Taesang. No matter how confident and domineering a CEO might be in public, in front of his future in-laws, he still had to act humble and well-mannered. Although Taesang behaved politely and respectfully, Mido's father still didn't like him. He could never forget his own miserable, humiliated state years ago when Taesang had stood at his door collecting debt. He knew it was Taesang who later helped him repay everything, and even covered his medical expenses. Yet, in his heart, he still felt Taesang was unworthy of his beloved daughter. He tried to persuade her to give him up, but Mido had already made up her mind. Her words made her younger brother, Mijun, raise his thumb in approval. Mido had never been indecisive in love. Now she knew clearly that she liked Taesang. Moreover, Taesang wasn't a bad man. He was wealthy, handsome, and sincere. She decided to try dating him first. If they turned out to be incompatible, she could always break up later. Those words left Taesang, who had been full of joy, suddenly unsure what to say. It was his first time being in love, and he didn't know how to treat a woman. He only knew to give Mido all his heart and everything he had. After dinner, Taesang and Mido went for a walk to sober up. They walked close together, their hands brushing. Mido thought he wanted to hold her hand but didn't dare, so she took the initiative and held his hand first. He said he hadn't meant to hold her hand. Taesang was truly a fool when it came to love. Mido, irritated, pulled her hand away and walked off. Taesang hurried after her and pulled her into his arms. He explained that he actually really wanted to hold her hand, but he had recently seen something online where a so-called love expert said that holding hands too soon after meeting was moving too fast. Mido couldn't help but laugh at his innocence. She felt as if she had found a treasure. In this day and age, men like Taesang, wealthy, handsome, and pure-hearted, were rare. The more she looked at him, the more she liked him, and she leaned closer to get a better look. Taesang misunderstood, thinking she was about to kiss him, so he quickly closed his eyes, nervous yet a little expectant. But in the end, Mido didn't kiss him. Still, Taesang wasn't disappointed. Just being able to hold her hand today was already enough for him. When Mido went inside, Taesang looked down at the hand that had just held hers and couldn't help but smile. He decided he wouldn't wash that hand tonight. The man in his 30s was so deeply in love that he acted like an 18-year-old boy. On the blackboard in front of Mido's bookstore, he wrote a love poem to confess his feelings to her. After Dalyi returned to Korea, he immediately went to Mido's house and left a love message for her on the blackboard. However, Mido didn't know that later Taesang also wrote another love poem on the board, which made Dalyi misunderstand that Mido had responded to his feelings. When he kissed her, Mido froze in shock. She had no idea that Taesang was reading inside the store. Fortunately, her younger brother Mi-jun appeared just in time to stop Dalyi from going any further. Mi-jun asked if that man was her ex-boyfriend and told his sister to put an end to that relationship once and for all. Now that she already had a boyfriend, she shouldn't meet her ex again, let alone let him kiss her on the cheek. Taesang, who overheard everything inside, couldn't help but feel uneasy. He didn't know how to deal with the situation. When Mido brought him some fruit, he pretended not to know anything. A man who's in love for the first time is terrified of losing such a hard-earned love, so he'd rather be the one to suffer. Fortunately, Mido's heart still belonged to him. The next day, Mi-do asked Dol Yi to meet her, and directly told him that she already had a boyfriend, and those love poems weren't written by her. She hoped Dol Yi wouldn't misunderstand. After being rejected, Dol Yi felt heartbroken and nearly cried, but outwardly he tried to act fine so that Mi-do wouldn't feel burdened. His sadness from the heartbreak quickly faded when his brother Jae-hee came back home. He had always known that his brother had gone to prison, but not the exact reason why. To protect his brother's pride, he had pretended all those years that Jae-hee had gone abroad. Seeing his brother cooking for him like before, Dol Yi's strong front finally broke down. His eyes turned red, and he rushed to hug his brother tightly, bursting into tears. Jae-hee originally thought that after being released from prison this time, he would live happily with his younger brother and Tae-sang. But they forgot about another person who was also involved in what happened back then. Deputy Director Young Kop. Young Kop had always disliked Tae-sang's group. Moreover, the woman he loved the most, Sung-ju, was also captivated by Tae-sang. His hatred for Tae-sang grew even deeper. On the day Jae-hee was released from prison, Young Kop deliberately came to provoke him. Hot-tempered as he was, Jae-hee beat him up, not realizing that this impulsive act would bring more trouble to Tae-sang. Young Kop immediately filed a complaint against him with the police. Since Jae-hee had just been released and already caused trouble, the police would likely impose a heavy punishment. Not wanting Tae-sang to worry, Sung-ju went to Young Kop herself to mediate. She knew Young Kop had feelings for her, and she intended to use that to pressure him into compromising. As expected, Young Kop agreed. As long as Jae-hee apologized, he would drop the charges. Having achieved her goal, Sung-ju was about to leave when Young Kop demanded that she kiss him. Feeling humiliated, Sung-ju glared at him with red eyes. After the kiss, she suppressed her disgust and left. However, on the day he was supposed to meet Sung-ju again, Young Kop showed up at Tae-sang's company with a group of thugs to make trouble. He demanded that Tae-sang kneel and apologize to him. Mi-do, who was standing nearby, didn't want to see her boyfriend suffer. She stepped forward and said she would call the police. In response, one of Young Kop's men slapped her to the ground. This time, Tae-sang couldn't hold back anymore. He rushed forward and started fighting with Young Kop's men. The scene turned into chaos. Young Kop himself didn't join the fight. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started recording. Mi-do tried to step in to help, but was slapped to the ground again by Young Kop's men. Tae-sang completely lost control. He grabbed the man and beat him mercilessly. At that moment, Mi-do was reminded of the time she had been kidnapped years ago. It was a nightmare for her. The Tae-sang before her now looked like a demon. She screamed for him to stop, then ran away from the scene. After returning home, she was haunted all night by what had happened during the day. She liked Tae-sang and knew he had a ruthless side, but seeing it with her own eyes still terrified her. Mi-do thought about it all night and decided that she shouldn't dwell on Tae-sang's past. At least now, he was treating her well. The next day, Mi-do dragged her tired body back to work. Tae-sang introduced a new director to everyone. To her shock, it turned out to be Dol Yi. The two of them froze when they met again, while Tae-sang, unaware of everything, remained cheerful. Tae-sang assigned Mi-do and Dol Yi to work together, accompanying each other to the construction site to inspect the progress of the resort project. As a result, both of them got soaked like drenched rats. This gave them the chance to spend some time alone together. While Tae-sang was still eating a lunchbox and working overtime at the office, Mi-do and Dol Yi went to a sauna to relax, then went shopping for clothes together. They didn't return home until midnight. Although Mi-do knew that Dol Yi liked her, she only saw him as a friend, and now they were spending time together purely for work. She didn't think that doing so meant she was betraying Tae-sang, but both men loved her deeply. The pure-hearted and devoted CEO trusted her completely, and had even agreed not to make their relationship public. Unexpectedly, this gave her and the young man a chance to grow closer. Tae-sang openly wore a couple ring, making everyone curious about who the woman was that had captured his heart. That day, he visited Dol Yi's house, where everyone kept pressing him for answers. Tae-sang, remembering Mi-do's request, kept their relationship a secret. When Tae-sang went to see Dol Yi's room and noticed a pair of matching stuffed toys, he asked curiously about them. Dol Yi, not wanting to cause trouble for Mi-do, didn't explain clearly. Neither of them knew that the other was his love rival. Mi-do still didn't know about the connection between Tae-sang and Dol Yi. The reason she wanted to keep their relationship private was because she wasn't sure yet if she could truly be with Tae-sang forever. She didn't want everyone to know about it. She had thought her feelings for Dol Yi were purely friendship, but that day, when she saw him happily chatting with another woman, she couldn't help but feel uneasy, as if something that belonged to her was being taken away. On the way back to the office, Tae-sang suddenly showed up to surprise her. Seeing her unhappy expression, he thought she must have been upset by something, so he gently brushed her hair and made a few jokes to cheer her up. Comforted by her boyfriend, the sadness she had felt just moments before quickly disappeared. Seeing Mi-do smile again lifted Tae-sang's spirits spirits too, but his happiness didn't last long. When he returned to his office, he found that his long-lost uncle, the one addicted to gambling, had come to see him. At the beginning, if it hadn't been for his uncle, his family wouldn't have fallen apart, and this time, his uncle came just to ask Tae-sang for money, even bringing up his mother. Although Tae-sang had missed his mother deeply over the years and had been searching for her, he still held some resentment toward her. After all, back then, she took only his younger brother and left him behind. When his uncle couldn't get the money, he immediately turned hostile, shouting that he would tell Tae-sang's mother how cold-hearted her son had become. Outside, Mido overheard the argument. Knowing that Tae-sang must be in a bad mood, she dragged him to an amusement park to help him forget his troubles. It was the first time Tae-sang had ever been comforted like that. He looked at Mido gently, his heart softening. He seemed to fall even more deeply in love with this innocent girl. The young man came to deliver a gift to his beloved goddess, only to find his boss there with her. Didol-yi was so shocked he couldn't say a word. In his mind, all the strange interactions between Tae-sang and Mido during this time suddenly made sense. He finally realized that he was the fool, and the realization hit him hard. He left Mido's house absent-mindedly, unable to give her the carefully prepared gift. When he got home, he thought for a long time, suddenly feeling that all the happy moments he had shared with Mido had been nothing but lies. The next day at work, Mido greeted Didol-yi as usual, but noticed he was cold toward her. She thought she might have forgotten some promise that upset him. Just as she was about to apologize, Didol-yi cut her off with a short, "It's nothing." Mido didn't push further, assuming he would calm down after a few days. However, during the meeting, all the little gestures between Mido and Tae-sang caught Didol-yi's eye, making him even more uncomfortable. He couldn't understand how Mido could be dating Tae-sang while still getting along with him so naturally. Her warmth toward him in the past had been real. It had made him believe he had a chance. Tae-sang had no idea that Didol-yi had discovered their relationship. After the meeting, when everyone else had left, he took the opportunity to kiss Mido. Mido was startled and immediately glanced behind her, afraid Didol-yi might see, because if he did, she would lose one of the men she could choose from. Didol-yi actually saw it happen. When Mido turned around, he quickly lowered his head and pretended to be reading a document. Mido refused to give up. After Tae-sang left, she carefully asked Didol-yi if he had seen anything earlier. Didol-yi pretended to be confused and said he had been too focused on reading the documents. He wanted to ask Mido when she had started dating Tae-sang, but he was afraid that the truth would hurt too much, so he chose to act as if he knew nothing. Mido sensed something strange about Didol-yi and kept asking if something was bothering him, but he kept denying it, which made her feel increasingly uneasy. That evening, during the party, when everyone was playing a game with a lie detector, one of their co-workers asked Didol-yi if he liked Mido. Didol-yi loudly answered yes, and the machine's green light turned on. Mido couldn't help but smile to herself. It seemed she had been overthinking things. But when it was Mido's turn and the others asked if she liked Didol-yi, she deliberately answered no, yet the lie detector lit up red. Everyone immediately started cheering and teasing them to be together. Mido already had a boyfriend, but instead of denying it, she shyly glanced at Didol-yi, her eyes showing a trace of longing. Tae-sang, wholeheartedly devoted to his girlfriend, now faced the news that she wanted to study abroad. Though terrified of being abandoned, he chose to respect her decision, and even proposed to her directly. Mido was deeply moved by his sincere proposal, and decided to give him another chance. Overjoyed, Tae-sang pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately. From then on, Tae-sang's affection for Mido became even more obvious. One day, he took both Mido and Didol-yi on a business trip by train. While Didol-yi appeared to be asleep, Tae-sang gently lifted Mido's chin and kissed her, not knowing that Didol-yi, who wasn't truly asleep, had seen everything. Mido looked at Didol-yi nervously, feeling guilty. Tae-sang, unaware of anything, was as happy as a child who'd just gotten candy. He cheerfully confessed to Didol-yi that his secret girlfriend was Mido. It felt like a heavy punch to Didol-yi's chest. The pain was unbearable, but in front of Tae-sang, he could only pretend to be surprised. His forced smile looked heartbreakingly painful. Throughout the rest of the trip, Mido kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with Didol-yi. She knew she could no longer interact with him as before. However, things didn't go as she expected. Right after the three of them arrived at their destination, Mido received a call from the art gallery, informing her that her qualification to work in London had been temporarily revoked. Mido was confused and didn't understand why. Then she remembered that the day after her interview, she had seen Tae-sang enter the art gallery. A painful suspicion crossed her mind. Could it be that Tae-sang had interfered behind her back? The thought made her burst into tears. As Didol-yi happened to walk by, he saw Mido crying alone. He guessed it was probably because of the issue with her overseas job. Later, Didol-yi went to find Tae-sang, hoping he could help Mido so she could go abroad for work. However, deep down, Tae-sang didn't want Mido to leave him. Being abandoned by his mother as a child had left him with a deep fear of separation. That was why he didn't want to help with Mido's plan to go overseas. Taesang's answer made Didol-yi feel somewhat dissatisfied. That night, while Taesang was out, Didol-yi quietly placed a bouquet of roses in front of Mi-do's room to comfort her. But just as he was about to leave, Mi-do suddenly opened the door. Didol-yi looked into her tearful eyes. In that moment, all his love and reluctance toward her surged uncontrollably. When they suddenly heard knocking on the door, both of them panicked and pressed themselves against the wall, not daring to make a sound. Taesang knocked for a long time, then called her phone. Seeing no one respond, he eventually returned to his room. Once the noise outside disappeared, Mi-do and Didol-yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Didol-yi apologized for his impulsive behavior, and Mi-do didn't blame him. She just told him to leave quickly. Unaware that he had been deceived, Taesang was still planning to find Didol-yi for a drink. But as soon as he stepped out of his room, he saw Didol-yi coming out of Mi-do's room. Naive as he was, Taesang believed Didol-yi's casual explanation and didn't question why. Right after calling Mi-do, Didol-yi had suddenly walked out of her room. Didol-yi, on the other hand, didn't regret what he had just done. Instead, he found Taesang increasingly annoying. If it weren't for Taesang, he wouldn't have been rejected by Mi-do. The admiration and gratitude he once felt toward Taesang had completely disappeared because of her. Especially the next day, when preparing for a business meeting, Didol-yi found out that all their partners had been taken away by Seungju. He blamed everything on Taesang. If Taesang hadn't dated Mi-do, despite knowing Seungju's feelings for him, things wouldn't have turned out this way. He despised Taesang for giving up his career for love. Later, Didol-yi advised Mi-do to leave Taesang. He confessed that he had long known about her relationship with Taesang and accused her of being with him for money, completely unlike the pure, admirable woman he thought she was. Being scolded by Didol-yi made Mi-do feel miserable. She truly believed she had become shallow, but hearing it from his mouth was unbearably painful. She blamed Taesang for turning her into such a materialistic woman. Mi-do went to confront Taesang, telling him that the art gallery overseas had rejected her and demanding to know whether he had interfered behind her back. Taesang wanted to deny it, but Mi-do had already assumed he was guilty and refused to believe anything he said. Although Mi-do didn't say the words "let's break up," her compromise was, without a doubt, a form of emotional injury to Taesang. On the way back, she and Taesang no longer spoke to each other. Didol-yi also sat far away from them. Seeing Taesang with his eyes closed, Mi-do and Didol-yi kept glancing at each other, like a pair of unfortunate lovers being torn apart by him. Mi-do, who already held many prejudices against Taesang, began to resent him even more after this incident. To get back at Taesang, she subconsciously started getting closer to Didol-yi. In the past, Didol-yi had given her a pair of high heels. Back then, when she heard him tell someone that he had bought high heels for his girlfriend, she refused to wear them. But now, she wore those shoes every day, as if declaring to everyone that she was Didol-yi's mysterious girlfriend. The first person to notice this was Jae-hee, Didol-yi's older brother. A few days earlier, after the three of them returned from the business trip, Didol-yi had immediately gone to confront Seungju about taking away their partners, only to be told that his brother Jae-hee had once taken the blame for Taesang. Didol-yi, who had long suspected that his brother's imprisonment had been unjust, instantly believed Seungju's words. What Seungju said wasn't entirely wrong. Jae-hee had indeed gone to prison voluntarily, but because Didol-yi already held resentment toward Taesang over Mi-do, and since his beloved brother had gone to jail because of him, his hatred for Taesang grew stronger and stronger. When Jae-hee later found out about the ambiguous relationship between Didol-yi and Mi-do, he tried to advise his younger brother to stay away from her. But Didol-yi, full of suspicion, questioned what kind of deal existed between Jae-hee and Taesang. Jae-hee, though angry, restrained himself and told Didol-yi to stop doubting like that, and not to let a woman ruin the bond between brothers. However, blinded by hatred, Didol-yi couldn't listen. The more Jae-hee tried to hide the truth about the past, the more convinced Didol-yi became that Taesang must have done something terrible, something that hurt both his brother and Mi-do. Meanwhile, because Mi-do's old house had become too dilapidated to live in, she had no choice but to bring her mother and younger brother, Mi-jun, to stay at Taesang's place. Her father, however, refused to go with them out of pride. In Mi-do's eyes, Taesang's kindness was nothing more than compensation for ruining her opportunity to work abroad. She wasn't happy with him, but she still quietly enjoyed everything he provided for her. In reality, the cancellation of her overseas position at the art gallery had nothing to do with Taesang. On the contrary, the day she saw him at the gallery, he was actually there to ask the manager to consider hiring her. The one who revoked her qualification was the wealthy heiress she had offended at the dinner party earlier. Coincidentally, that woman was in charge of the project. That day, when she happened to visit the art gallery for inspection and saw Mi-do's application file, she tore it up without hesitation. Yet while Mi-do was still grieving over her lost chance to go abroad, the director of the art gallery suddenly came to see her and said that Didol-yi had recommended her. Although she could no longer go to London, she now had an opportunity to go to New York instead. At this point, in Mi-do's eyes, Tae-sang had become the man who destroyed her dream. While Dal-yi was the one who gave her new hope, Mi-do naturally felt even more grateful to Dal-yi. So when Dal-yi was assigned to work abroad, he came to say goodbye to her before leaving, and the two could no longer suppress their desire, giving in to their passion, right in Tae-sang's house. But at the height of the moment, Tae-sang suddenly returned home. The two panicked and hurriedly put on their clothes. Tae-sang wasn't stupid. He eventually realized the improper relationship between Mi-do and Dal-yi, but he didn't make a scene. Instead, he pretended not to know anything, and continued to live calmly with Mi-do. However, as an outsider, Mi-do's younger brother Mi-jun noticed the love triangle between his sister, Tae-sang, and Dal-yi. Taking advantage of Tae-sang's absence, Mi-jun asked Mi-do if she had feelings for Dal-yi, and Mi-do helplessly replied that if she had met Dal-yi a bit earlier, perhaps things wouldn't have turned out this way. However, she forgot that she had actually met Dal-yi even before Tae-sang. She just hadn't paid attention to him back then, and only regarded him as a neighbor in the same area. Mi-jun didn't expose her. He simply told her to follow her heart and not force herself to stay with Tae-sang just because of debt. But Mi-do felt that the current situation was irreversible. Even though she had feelings for Dal-yi, she was already engaged to Tae-sang. She couldn't just call off the engagement and turn to Dal-yi's arms. Meanwhile, right after returning from his overseas business trip, Dal-yi received a package from Tae-sang. Inside was the shirt he had forgotten at Tae-sang's house that day. Dal-yi was horrified, feeling as if his life was over. His affair with Mi-do had finally been discovered. At the same time, Jae-hee, who was ironing Dal-yi's shirts at home, noticed that one cuff had Tae-sang's name embroidered on it, and couldn't help feeling suspicious, especially since Tae-sang hadn't visited their house recently. After that, Tae-sang became increasingly deranged. Not only did he continue to treat Mi-do kindly, but he also grew more generous, even giving her a car. Just as Tae-sang was taking Mi-do for a test drive, she suddenly received a text message from Dal-yi. Mi-do looked fearfully at Tae-sang beside her, but he seemed completely unaware. After that, Tae-sang dragged Mi-do to a bridal shop and said he wanted to get married next month. Mi-do wanted to refuse, but this time, Tae-sang was firm. Knowing she was at fault and afraid he might get angry, she obediently tried on the wedding dress. Seeing Mi-do appear in a pure white gown, Tae-sang smiled as if he were looking at the innocent, spotless girl she once was. Unfortunately, time had changed her. Her purity was long gone. She had become a woman who clearly already had a boyfriend, yet still entangled herself with another man. Tae-sang knew exactly what had happened between Mi-do and Dal-yi in his own house, but he still chose to forgive her. Turning to Dal-yi, he warned him to stay away from her, but Dal-yi believed that Mi-do didn't truly love Tae-sang, that she was only with him because of debt, and that he was the man Mi-do truly loved. They loved each other but were separated by the despicable Tae-sang. After confronting Tae-sang directly, Dal-yi became increasingly arrogant, determined to take Mi-do away from him. Mi-do, however, hesitated. She knew her relationship with Dal-yi was wrong, but the more she said that, the more Dal-yi believed she was being forced to stay with Tae-sang. Enraged, Dal-yi revealed that Tae-sang had let his own brother take the blame for a murder and go to prison. Because he was prejudiced against Tae-sang, Dal-yi insisted that Tae-sang had made Jae-hee confess in his place. Even though Jae-hee explained many times that it had been his own choice, Dal-yi refused to believe it, and he even thought Tae-sang's sponsorship for his overseas studies was part of Tae-sang's compensation to Jae-hee. Therefore, all of Dal-yi's gratitude toward Tae-sang turned into entitlement, and he wanted to use this to drive a wedge between Tae-sang and Mi-do. Just as the two were arguing, Tae-sang suddenly appeared. Startled, Mi-do told Dal-yi to hide inside first, then hurriedly sent Tae-sang out to buy something for her. Taking advantage of that moment, she once again made love with Dal-yi, but unexpectedly, Tae-sang had never actually left. Tae-sang had given them many chances, yet those chances only became excuses for them to go even further. Unable to endure it anymore, he rushed forward, shoved Dal-yi away, and even picked up a stick, intending to teach him a lesson. Mi-do instinctively shielded Dal-yi with her body, so Tae-sang had no choice but to throw the stick aside and silently drag Mi-do away. On the way, Mi-do tried to explain, but Tae-sang, overwhelmed with anger and afraid of losing control, shouted at her to be quiet. It wasn't until they returned home that he finally calmed down. Even at this point, Tae-sang stubbornly refused to let go of Mi-do. He had once lost his beloved mother, which turned him into a child starved of affection. Now, after finally finding a woman who taught him how to love, he couldn't bring himself to give up, no matter how many times she betrayed him. What pained Tae-sang the most was this. Mi-do had been so gentle just days ago, so why did she suddenly change? He hadn't done anything wrong, so why did she abandon him? Mi-do was like that, and so was his mother. The dominant domineering CEO, unintentionally recorded the conversation between his fiancée and his own brother, and he was devastated. He had originally set up the recorder to film a birthday message for Mi-do, but it unexpectedly became the weapon that destroyed him. Tae-sang didn't know much about love, but he knew that to love someone meant to be faithful. Yet why did Mi-do, the woman who once said she would love him forever, he suddenly fall for another man? The beautiful memories he had carefully cherished now turned into a cruel joke. Tae-sang burst into tears, crying out in despair. Mi-do heard the sound of things breaking in the living room. When she went out, Tae-sang was already gone. She saw the shattered pieces on the floor. They were the ceramic dolls she and Tae-sang had once made together. Her eyes showed a trace of discomfort. The next morning, Mi-do woke up and began cleaning the broken fragments from the floor. Her mother found out that Mi-do loved another man and refused to marry Tae-sang, so she couldn't hold back her anger and scolded her for becoming a wicked woman. The man who knowingly approached her despite knowing she was engaged surely wasn't a good person either. Feeling wronged by her mother's words, Mi-do thought she was only pursuing true love. Tae-sang was a good man, but he only fulfilled her material needs. Indeed, he had given her beautiful memories. When Tae-sang shared his past, she was momentarily moved and promised to take care of him and love him. But people change. No one can guarantee they'll stay the same forever. She believed Tae-sang would eventually change too. Dol-yi, on the other hand, was different. He understood her, empathized with her, and knew her dreams. Now she had the chance to work in New York. The high salary that Tae-sang gave her had already allowed her to save a considerable amount. She had no worries about material things anymore, so emotionally, she wanted to pursue spiritual fulfillment. And Dol-yi could give her that. As Dol-yi's brother and Tae-sang's friend, Jae-hee found this woman, Mi-do, terrifying. She easily moved between two men, and even turned the close bond between the brothers into hostility. Even someone as bad as Yongkop couldn't have done that. Jae-hee didn't want the three of them to keep making the same mistakes, so he called Mi-do out alone, hoping she would give up on Dol-yi. Mi-do didn't want to argue with someone like him. She said they just didn't understand the love between her and Dol-yi, which was why they kept trying to stop them. Those words almost drove Jae-hee mad, but since she was still his sister-in-law in name, he couldn't lay a hand on her. A few days earlier, when Jae-hee brought Tae-sang back from the countryside and saw how dispirited he was, then later watched that video, he couldn't believe Mi-do and Dol-yi could go that far. Afterward, he wanted to persuade Dol-yi to stop being delusional, but blinded by love, Dol-yi no longer cared whether the person he was hurting was his own brother. Although Jae-hee was a gangster and didn't understand lofty morals, he knew one thing clearly: never touch your friend's wife, especially not Tae-sang, the man who had helped both him and Dol-yi. He truly couldn't understand how his once obedient and kind younger brother had turned into someone like this. Unable to talk sense into Dol-yi, and watching Tae-sang suffer deeply because of the two of them, Jae-hee decided to handle the matter himself. Earlier, Tae-sang had planned to let Mi-do go. He had told her family openly that he would break up with her and let her go abroad to find her own life. Unexpectedly, his decision to let go made Mi-do uneasy. Hadn't he once said he would never give her up even if it killed him? How could he change his mind so easily? Mi-do felt angry, so Tae-sang had changed after all. She froze, not expecting Tae-sang to hate her this much. Though their relationship had been doomed from the start, couldn't he at least wish her well and quietly walk away instead of making things so unbearable? If he had the chance to do it over again, Tae-sang would have chosen never to meet Mi-do, let alone fall in love with her. Watching Tae-sang's pained expression from nearby, Jae-hee's eyes turned red. Before Mi-do entered their lives, they had been so happy. Dol-yi had been a good, well-behaved boy, but since Mi-do appeared, that happiness had been cruelly shattered. This only made Jae-hee more determined to eliminate Mi-do. He went to an old scrapyard, found a nearly discarded car, and used the video as bait to lure Mi-do out. The moment he drove straight toward her, only one thought filled his mind: Tae-sang and Dol-yi will no longer be tormented by this woman. Once she's dead, everything will return to the way it used to be. Not long after Jae-hee drove away, Mi-do was found by a passing truck driver and taken to the hospital. Her life was saved. When Tae-sang arrived at the hospital, Mi-do's father blamed him for his daughter's condition. He had always hated Tae-sang. If Tae-sang hadn't come to collect debts years ago, Mi-do would never have met this terrifying man, and their family wouldn't have ended up in such misery. The woman who barely survived the accident had lost her memory, remembering only the domineering CEO she had just broken up with. She leaned close to his ear and softly called him by his nickname, Tay-Tay. Tae-sang immediately felt relieved, but Dol-yi standing beside them looked uneasy. When Mi-do woke up, she didn't even glance at Dol-yi. Her eyes were fixed only on Tae-sang. At that moment, Mido's father rushed in to visit his daughter. Mido looked confused and asked why she was there. Everyone soon realized that she had suffered a head injury and lost her memory, remembering only Taesang and her parents. She had completely forgotten Didalyi and how the car accident had happened. As her parents were about to step out to ask the doctor about her condition, Mido's mother saw Didalyi being pushed out of the room. She had seen him before at Taesang's house, but in her impression, the relationship between Mido and Didalyi wasn't close enough for him to visit her like this. Mido's mother immediately understood that Didalyi was the bad man who had shaken her daughter's feelings for Taesang. She asked if he was Director Han. Worried that things would escalate, Mido's father and Mijun hurriedly pulled her mother outside. Didalyi still wanted to talk to Mido, but she completely ignored him. He had no choice but to temporarily give up on helping her recover her memory, and joined Mijun in searching for the person who had caused Mido's accident. On this side, although Mido had regained consciousness, her legs could no longer support her. The doctor's explanation was vague. He couldn't guarantee when or if she would recover, only that they could wait and hope for a miracle. This made Mido extremely discouraged. In just a few months, she was supposed to go abroad and start the life she had always dreamed of. Now that she couldn't stand, didn't that mean all her previous efforts had been in vain? Taesang, worried that Mido might suffer psychological trauma, stayed by her side almost all the time. That day, he returned her phone to her. Looking through the call log, Mido noticed that on the day of the accident, she had made multiple calls to Jae-hee's number. She tried calling again to ask why she had done so. Jae-hee immediately became tense, claiming that she must have dialed the wrong number and that he knew nothing about it. But Taesang, standing beside her, heard the name Jae-hee and seemed to realize what had really happened. Later, Taesang arranged to meet Jae-hee at a villa in the suburbs, the very area near where Mido's accident had occurred. He got straight to the point and asked if Jae-hee had called Mido and asked her to meet him that day. Knowing he couldn't hide it anymore, Jae-hee confessed everything he had done. Enraged, Taesang struck him. Jae-hee didn't want his younger brother to become a villain, fighting over a woman with the man who had once saved them. In this love triangle between Mido and the two men, the one who suffered most was the man who only wanted to protect his older brother and his younger brother. Now, Jae-hee had completely given up. He wouldn't turn himself in and be separated from his brothers again. That day, after Mido was discharged from the hospital, Taesang took her, along with Mijun and Mido's best friend, to a mountain resort to help her relax. But that evening, while Taesang and Mijun were busy preparing dinner, Mido went outside to get some fresh air, and Jae-hee suddenly appeared beside her. Mido didn't remember that Jae-hee had been the one to hit her, and since Taesang had told her that Jae-hee was his beloved younger brother, she had no reason to be on guard. Jae-hee said he had something to tell her, and as he pushed her further up the mountain path, he questioned her, accusing her of pretending to have lost her memory and to be unable to walk. He demanded to know what her real motive was. Mido didn't understand what he was talking about and kept denying it. Jae-hee didn't push further. He left her by the roadside at the top of the mountain and walked away. Left alone by the roadside, Mido was terrified and tried to move her wheelchair downhill by herself. However, the path was uneven and sloped downward, causing her to lose control and be thrown out of the chair. She hit the ground and immediately lost consciousness. When Taesang went out looking for her, he ran into Jae-hee coming down the mountain. Realizing that Jae-hee had done something reckless again, he rushed up the mountain to find her. But when he reached the spot where Mido should have been, she was nowhere to be found, and heavy rain began to pour down. Taesang had no choice but to return and inform Mijun and Mido's best friend. The three of them split up to search for her. On the mountaintop roadside, the rainwater woke Mido up. She found herself in a desolate valley. Frightened, she crawled forward while regretting all the wrong things she had done. It was her betrayal of Taesang that had led her to this. Now, she only wanted to survive and return to Taesang to atone for her mistakes. Whether it was the fall that made her regain her memory or that she had never lost it in the first place, fate didn't let her die there. Before long, Taesang found her and carried her back to the resort. She kept apologizing, saying she would never betray him again, but the next morning, she acted as if she didn't remember anything from the night before. Hearing that Taesang hadn't slept all night while taking care of her, she felt deeply sorry and urged him to go back to his room to rest. Taesang wanted to sleep beside her, but Mido said something that made him unable to stay. At first, he didn't think much of it, but once he left the room, he quickly realized something was off. It was highly possible that Mido hadn't lost her memory at all. His attitude toward her began to change. He grew cautious and constantly probed her with his words. After all, he was a man deeply in love, deceived by the same woman again and again. Who could bear that? Hoping to help Mido remember him, Didalyi met with Mijun and asked him to put up a poster of Mido's favorite artist in her room. On it, he attached a small note that said, "Didalyi will always wait for Mido." Mijun didn't refuse, thinking it was just a way to help his sister regain her memory. When Mido returned and saw the poster and the note, she immediately knew it had been arranged by Didalyi. But since she was staying at Tae-sang's house, she worried he might see it, so she decided to take the poster down herself. While trying to take it down, she suddenly realized that her legs could actually support her. Not wanting Tae-sang to know she could stand, she quickly grabbed the poster and lay back on the bed. Tae-sang wasn't stupid. Seeing the wheelchair still parked by the door, his suspicions grew stronger, though outwardly he pretended to know nothing. Mi-do's father still believed that his daughter's accident had been orchestrated by Tae-sang. The day after Mi-do said she didn't want to get married, the accident happened. Moreover, in his eyes, Tae-sang was nothing more than a gangster. He had never forgotten the image of Tae-sang coming to collect debt from him years ago. Mi-do's father came to Tae-sang's house to cause trouble, shouting that he would call the police to investigate him. At that moment, Mi-do announced that she had regained her memory and could recall what happened during the accident. She told her father to call the police to take her statement. This made Tae-sang uneasy. He knew Jae-hee had been the one responsible, but to his surprise, Mi-do didn't expose him. In front of the police, she completely concealed the truth, claiming that the car which hit her had been white, while Jae-hee's car was black. She was clearly covering for Jae-hee. Although this could protect him, it made Tae-sang deeply uncomfortable. He didn't understand what Mi-do's true intention was. After giving her statement, when her family stepped out, Mi-do secretly contacted Didal-yi and asked to meet. She told him that she had regained both her memory and the ability to walk, but had to keep pretending to be disabled. She begged Didal-yi to keep her secret and not to confront Tae-sang anymore. Unable to force her, Didal-yi had no choice but to let her stay by Tae-sang's side for now. However, Mi-do still thought Tae-sang was as foolish as before, believing he remained blindly devoted to her. In reality, Tae-sang was slowly losing patience. That night, when Tae-sang returned home, he noticed fresh flower petals stuck to Mi-do's high heels. After checking the security footage with the guard, he confirmed that Mi-do had been faking her disability. When the domineering CEO confronted her, she instead acted as if she were the one being wronged. Hearing those words, Tae-sang's heart shattered bit by bit, but what Mi-do said next drove him completely insane. He shouted that he had made up his mind, and once her legs fully recovered, he would let her go. He would let her return to the man she loved. At that moment, Mi-do felt a sense of self-righteous nobility. To protect Didal-yi from being harmed by Tae-sang, she was willing to sacrifice herself. She even admitted that she had once tried to love Tae-sang but failed. Still, she insisted that this couldn't be called betrayal. Since she hadn't exactly fallen out of love, she simply never truly loved him in the first place. Mi-do now regretted ever meeting Tae-sang. If she could go back in time, she would never have accepted his help. Her life, she believed, would have been far more interesting than it was now. But she forgot that if it hadn't been for Tae-sang risking execution by his boss to pay off her family's debt, her family would never have been able to live in peace. Seeing Mi-do's attitude, Tae-sang no longer wanted to argue. He slammed the door and left. Yet what broke him wasn't just that. At the same time, Jae-hee was fighting with another one of their close brothers, Dong-gu, inside an abandoned building. Because Dong-gu betrayed them for money and went to Young-kap's side. A man who valued loyalty like Jae-hee despised this behavior, so he wanted to beat Dong-gu to make him come to his senses. But in the end, Dong-gu played dirty and threw lime into Jae-hee's eyes. Jae-hee couldn't see and fell from the upper floor. When Tae-sang arrived, Jae-hee was still clinging to his last bit of consciousness and begged Tae-sang to take good care of Didal-yi. Tae-sang hurriedly took Jae-hee to the hospital for emergency treatment. Although his life was saved, due to a head injury, Jae-hee became a vegetative person. After arranging for Jae-hee to stay in the hospital, Tae-sang went to his house to help clean up his belongings. By chance, from a photo of Jae-hee's grandmother, he discovered a letter and a business card. The letter said that Didal-yi was not Jae-hee's biological brother, but when Jae-hee was 6 years old, his grandmother worked as a nanny for a wealthy family. The daughter of that family, who was about to get married, went to Hong Kong on a business trip, met a man, and became pregnant. The family, worried about the scandal, told Jae-hee's grandmother to take the newborn baby to an orphanage. Feeling sorry for the child who had no relatives, Jae-hee's grandmother secretly kept him and raised him as Jae-hee's younger brother. Jae-hee had always been a man of loyalty since childhood, treating Didal-yi as his own brother. After his grandmother passed away, he took on the responsibility of taking care of his brother alone. It wasn't until he was 20 years old that a man from Hong Kong came looking for Didal-yi. Jae-hee couldn't bear to part with his brother, so he didn't tell the man about Didal-yi. In his life, he had no great ambitions, only wishing to live happily forever with his elder brother Tae-sang and his younger brother Didal-yi. Even if it meant sacrificing himself for that happiness, he was willing. Tae-sang looked at the letter and couldn't hold back his tears. He always felt that he was the one who had harmed Jae-hee. Mi-do's mother initially liked Tae-sang because he had helped their family a lot. From the first time Mi-do officially brought Tae-sang home, he told them about his background. Mi-do's mother felt deep affection for him, so when her daughter betrayed him and hurt him, she was heartbroken. The day after Mi-do Mido's birthday, she completely moved out of Taesong's house. When Taesang came back from the hospital and saw her packing, he didn't stop her. Jaehee's accident left him with no energy to think about his relationship with Mido. Moreover, what Mido said the night before had already left him hopeless. No matter how much he feared loss, there was no need to force someone who hated him to stay by his side. Mido thought that leaving Taesang would let her return to her old life, but shortly after returning home, her landlord informed her that the building they were renting was about to be demolished and told them to move out before the end of the month. Normally, her family could have refused since the landlord broke the contract first, but because her parents had failed to pay 3 months' rent while saving for her dowry, the landlord had a valid reason to cancel it. Once again, Mido's family fell into hardship. At that time, Didol-yi had just returned from abroad. Upon hearing that his brother had been in an accident, he instinctively believed that Taesang was responsible. He asked if Taesang wanted to kill his brother as well. Taesang didn't deny it, because deep down, he too felt it was his fault. After Didol-yi was escorted out by the doctor, he didn't return to the hospital room but went straight home. As soon as he sat down, he noticed Taesang's phone had fallen onto his sofa and wondered why Taesang had been in his house. So the next day, he went to confront Taesang. Taesang didn't hide anything and told him about Jaehee's letter, even saying he could come to his place that evening to get it. However, Didol-yi didn't care about any letter. All he wanted to know was whether Taesang had ordered his brother to kill Mido. Taesang couldn't deny it. At first, Jaehee really did hear him telling Mido that he wished she were dead, which made Jaehee develop the idea of killing. Taesang knew well that Didol-yi already hated him deeply. Even if he told Didol-yi the truth, it would only make Didol-yi think he was shirking responsibility. Didol-yi and Mido were the same kind of people. When they fell in love, they both saw Taesang as an enemy. No matter what he did for them, it was always seen as something bad. Didol-yi became even more determined to destroy Taesang. He went to their Hong Kong business partner, Mr. Kang, and used his position to persuade them to buy Taesang's company. After hearing his suggestion, Mr. Kang's son, Roy Kang, immediately showed a change in expression. Using the excuse of investment, Didol-yi brought Roy Kang back to Korea to meet Taesang and discuss cooperation. Taesang was deceived. Believing that Didol-yi wouldn't mix personal feelings with work, he happily took Roy Kang around, hoping that if Roy Kang enjoyed himself, he would sign the contract without hesitation. Taesang knew that Didol-yi's biological father was Mr. Kang, so he planned to ask Roy Kang about him. Roy Kang didn't answer. Instead, he asked whether Taesang had any siblings. Hearing the word siblings, Taesang suddenly became sad and confessed that he had a younger brother who had gone missing. For years, he had been searching for him, but every time he searched, he was also afraid of hearing bad news about his brother. Hearing Taesang's words, Roy Kang's eyes showed sorrow. Later, Taesang personally took Roy Kang everywhere. What struck him as strange was that all the places Roy Kang wanted to visit were the same ones he and his brother used to go to as children. Moreover, he discovered that Roy Kang, like him, couldn't eat spicy food at all. Taesang kept unconsciously talking about his brother, while Roy Kang always looked pained listening to him. However, Taesang didn't notice anything strange about Roy Kang. He even thought Roy Kang's tears were because of the spicy food. Meanwhile, through his cooperation with Sung-ju, Didol-yi investigated and discovered Roy Kang's true identity. Sung-ju had found Taesang's mother before he did. She first built a good relationship with her, then secretly took her toothbrush. At the same time, Didol-yi bribed a hotel employee and obtained Roy Kang's toothbrush to conduct a DNA test. When Mido saw the DNA report, she thought Didol-yi had accepted that he was Mr. Kang's son and had voluntarily taken the test. In fact, a few days earlier, Taesang had given Mido the letter Jaehee left behind, asking her to pass it on to Dol-yi. After reading the letter, Mido finally understood everything, and all her resentment toward Taesang instantly disappeared. She agreed to help him with this matter. However, even when Mido tried to explain, Dol-yi refused to believe it. He insisted that Taesang was in the wrong. He gave the DNA test results to Sung-ju, and together they confirmed that Roy Kang was actually Taesang's missing younger brother. Back then, when Taesang's family was in debt, his mother fell in love with another man and left with her young son. Later, the man abandoned her, leaving her to wander the streets, and her son went missing. Unexpectedly, that boy was adopted by Mr. Kang. Dol-yi thought that Roy Kang and Mr. Kang didn't know about Taesang's identity. He wanted to use them to get rid of Taesang. To make the two biological brothers, Taesang and Roy Kang, kill each other would be the cruelest revenge against Taesang. However, Dol-yi's thinking was still too simple. A few days earlier, while Mido was searching for a place to live, she happened to pass by the neighborhood where Taesang used to live as a child. Taesang had taken her there before, so she still remembered. As memories came flooding back, Mi-do suddenly wanted to go to Taesang's old house. There, she unexpectedly ran into Roy Kang, who was standing at the door with a sorrowful expression, his hand gently resting on the gate. She remembered that Didal Yi had once said he wanted to use Taesang's younger brother to attack him. Mi-do was now certain that Roy Kang was Taesang's brother. Thinking of this, she immediately went to find Taesang to tell him. At that time, Taesang was busy overseeing the construction of the resort site and had no time to talk to her. Just as Mi-do was about to wait for him to finish, an accident happened. Fortunately, Mi-do pushed him away in time, so Taesang wasn't hurt. Only Mi-do's leg was scratched from the fall. Taesang wanted to take her to the hospital, but Mi-do still wanted to tell him about Roy Kang. While they were arguing, Didal Yi arrived, looking tense. Knowing that he intended to use Roy Kang against Taesang, Mi-do stopped talking. Taesang, worried about Mi-do's injury, put work aside and took her to get treated. During this time, Mi-do took the chance to say what she hadn't finished earlier. She told him that she and Une had gone to look at houses together, and she felt the neighborhood seemed familiar, then realized it was the one where he had lived as a child. But at the gate of that house, she saw Roy Kang. It wasn't just a coincidence. He had placed his hand on the gate, as if recalling something warm. Taesang froze for a moment. Mi-do didn't look like she was lying, and there was no reason for her to make up such a story. But Roy Kang had clearly said he had no siblings and didn't recognize him. Taesang suddenly felt confused. However, what mattered most to him now was helping Didal Yi reunite with Mr. Kang. He went to Hong Kong alone to tell Mr. Kang about Didal Yi. Mr. Kang, thinking Taesang and Roy Kang had already reunited, took the initiative to tell him the truth, that Roy Kang was indeed Taesang's younger brother. This time, Taesang finally confirmed that everything Mi-do said was true. At the same time, Donggu went to the hospital room where Jae-hee was staying. He had been ordered by Yong Kop to kill Jae-hee, but since they had once been brothers through life and death, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Unexpectedly, Jae-hee woke up. At first, Donggu was startled, then he threw away the syringe, hugged Jae-hee, crying and laughing, insisting that he would use the rest of his life to atone for his sins. Jae-hee didn't blame him, and even hugged him with a smile. After Taesang received the news that Jae-hee had regained consciousness, he immediately said to Mr. Kang, "Please come to Korea to meet Jae-hee. I think it's best to let him explain everything himself." However, after Taesang left, Mr. Kang suddenly suffered a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, he was taken there in time, and his life was saved. Meanwhile, after waking up, Jae-hee told Didal Yi everything, hoping he could clear up the misunderstanding with Taesang. Reconciling with the mother, who had heartlessly abandoned him, was extremely difficult, but the kind and strong-minded Taesang chose to forgive her. Taesang had already known his mother's whereabouts and had visited her a few times, but had never been able to officially reunite. Now that his younger brother had been found, Taesang felt there was no need to hold on to resentment anymore. He wanted his family to be reunited, but reality did not go as they wished. After a heavy rain, a white skeleton was washed down from the mountain. Through investigation, the police discovered it was the man who had abandoned Taesang's mother. Following the clues, they traced the case back to Taesang and his mother. Because on the night the man was killed, Taesang had gone to see him, he became the prime suspect. When Seung-ju learned about it, she immediately went to the police station to find Taesang, apologized for what she had done in the past, and then proposed marriage to him. Seung-ju had already prepared herself for rejection, but unexpectedly, Taesang agreed. Perhaps he also wanted to make up for her years of unrequited love. However, the reason Seung-ju proposed marriage at this time was because she knew that the only person who knew the truth about the man's death was Young-gab. She wanted to use the marriage as leverage to force Young-gab to come to the police and confess the truth. On the night that man died, Taesang indeed went to see him because he had abandoned his mother. The two went to a deserted place and started arguing. The man played dirty and hit Taesang on the head with a rock, knocking him unconscious. At that moment, Young-gab happened to pass by. The drunken man insulted him, then kicked Taesang and fell down the stairs himself, dying from the fall. When Jae-hee came to find Taesang and discovered the man's body, he thought Taesang had killed him in the fight and took it upon himself to dispose of the body. Young-gab had seen everything, but because he resented Taesang for winning Seung-jo's heart, he kept it hidden all this time. This time, when Seung-ju suddenly decided to marry Taesang, Young-gab, who loved Seung-ju deeply, completely broke down. He cried and begged her, "Don't get married. I'll go to the police and tell them the truth." In the end, the wedding was never held, and both kept their promises. Taesang finally understood Seung-ju's feelings. He didn't blame her for running away from the wedding and quietly accepted it. After Jae-hee waited for Mr. Kang to recover and come to Korea, he told him everything about Dal-yi, and finally helped father and son reunite. After finishing all this, he willingly went to the police to turn himself in, taking responsibility for disposing of the body party. Once everything was resolved, Tae-sang was finally able to take Roy Kang to reunite with their mother. Roy Kang finally revealed why he hadn't accepted Tae-sang. He said that when Tae-sang was 20, he was fully capable of finding him. But since he never came, Roy Kang had held a grudge ever since. But now, none of that mattered anymore. Living together as a family was what truly mattered. Mido also achieved her dream of working at an art gallery abroad, just as she had always wished. A few years later, she returned to Korea and found that Tae-sang had bought that building and opened a bookstore again.